second. I'm going to start over because I'm recording this session and I forgot to push record, so bear with me. Welcome everyone. My name is Debbie Gold. I'm Assistant Director of Marketing at Nova Southeastern University's Mailman Segal Center for Human Development. We have a wonderful session planned for you today, and I'm really excited about bringing this presentation to you. Before we start, I want to review that this session will be approximately 45 minutes long. It's being recorded, and you will be able to upload it. I'm uploading it online, and it will be available to you. You'll have the opportunity to view it at your leisure on our YouTube channel, NSU's Mailman Segal Center for Human Development. And I'll have that at the end of the presentation for you to remember that place if you want to view it again. We encourage your questions, so if you're familiar with this technology, what I'd like you to do is submit your questions by going to the chat feature on the bottom part of the Go-To training panel to submit questions, and we will have a Q&A at the end. And the PowerPoint presentation that we will be presenting to you is in the materials section for you to download at your convenience. I'm thrilled to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Lorraine Brevny. She is the Executive Director of the Early Childhood Institute at Nova Southeastern University's Mailman Segal Center for Human Development. She directly supervises the operation of 3 early childhood programs, including an infant and toddler program, a preschool program, and a parent education program, and has overseen the launch of the center's new Preschool Plus program for children with behavioral disorders. Lorraine has published numerous articles and has co-authored the texts Fundamentals of Early Childhood Education, Early Child Education Today, All About Childcare and Early Education, and All About Childcare and Early Education, a Trainee's Manual. She served on the board of the National Coalition for Campus Children's Centers from 2015 to 2019, and was a member of the National Association for Education of Young Children Council for accreditation from 2016 to 2019. I'm thrilled to present you to our presenter, Dr. Lorraine Brevny.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'm just going to get down to business and start by acknowledging what many of you report feeling, and that is that mental and behavioral disorders in children are increasing. Why this is happening is still a puzzle, but it is estimated that 1 in 5 children and adolescents in the US has a mental disorder that interferes with their daily functioning. The rates are very similar across different racial and ethnic groups after controlling for income, education, and community support. However, as we know, poverty and low socioeconomic status are risk factors that appear to increase the rate of mental health disorders. However, fewer than 1 in 5 of children who have a mental health disorder receive the mental health services they need. It used to be that you could differentiate typical and inclusive classrooms in any early childhood program, but today we recognize that every classroom is an inclusive classroom. So in terms of statistics, we know that over 34 million children in the US have experienced at least one adverse event during their childhood years. And what do we mean by an adverse event? These include things like child abuse and neglect, parental incarceration, or parental substance abuse. While it isn't inevitable, it is more probable that children who suffer trauma are more likely to have challenges regulating their behavior and interacting appropriately with peers or teachers in school. We also know that 6.1 million children have received a diagnosis of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. 4.5 million children have a diagnosed behavior problem. 7.1 million children have diagnosed anxiety. And 1.9 million children, or just over 3% of children, have diagnosed depression. 3 in 4 children with depression also have anxiety, and 50% have behavior problems. When left untreated, childhood mental and behavioral disorders can lead to school failure, substance abuse, violence, suicide, and increase in the risk of coming into contact with the juvenile justice systems. So, Houston, we have a problem. We have a national crisis on our hands. So while research confirms that the ability of young children to control their emotional and cognitive impulses is a strong indicator of both short-term and long-term school and life success, A recent study showed that just over 50,000 children were suspended at least once from preschool programs in 2016. And 17,000 children were expelled because teachers feel they are unable to control them. Preschool children are 3 times more likely to be suspended than all K-12 students combined. Programs want to serve all children, but often they don't have the resources or time to help them. In a survey of early childhood providers in New Mexico, for example, respondents reported that 4 out of 16, or 1/4 of preschool-age children in their programs, presented with persistent, challenging behavior. Approximately 1/3 of providers had disenrolled a child because the behavior was significantly impacting the safety and well-being of other children. So preschool suspensions and expulsion are serious issues for children, for schools, for families, and for the broader community. Young children who are suspended or expelled are as much as 10 times more likely to drop out of high school, experience academic failure, and face incarceration. Preschool suspension and expulsion is also a serious issue for teachers who, despite their best efforts, report feeling ill-prepared and ill-equipped to deal with behavioral challenges in the classroom. Directors report that yes, having children in their program is their bread and butter. They want the income, but if they don't feel they are doing well by children, then they sometimes have to look for alternatives. In terms of, if we look more closely at the statistics that I was showing, disproportionality exists in early childhood suspensions and expulsions. Disproportionality in terms of age, gender, race, and ability. Studies have found that programs are more likely to suspend or expel children who are Black, who are boys, and who are older, for example, 4-year-olds. Although infants and toddlers are not exempt, many programs still have a 3 strikes and you're out policy for biting. And as we know, biting is a developmentally appropriate but unacceptable strategy for toddlers who do not have the language they need to have their needs met quickly, although it's not a developmentally appropriate strategy for 3- and 4-year-olds. So the evidence speaks for itself. Black boys make up 19% of preschool enrollment, yet they account for 47% of preschoolers suspended 1 or more times. And we call this the discipline gap. In fact, children of color, boys, and children with disabilities are more likely to be harshly disciplined than other children for the same behaviors. They're also more likely to be disciplined for behaviors that are not well defined, such as having a bad attitude. I think we're all guilty of this at some time or another. Or as one teacher told me recently, for being sassy. Implicit bias contributes to the discipline gap, especially for Black boys. If teachers expect bad behavior, they watch children more closely and punish them more often. So let's look at what we mean by implicit bias. Implicit bias is attitudes, stereotypes, and beliefs that affect how we treat others. Implicit bias is not intentional, but it can still impact how we judge others based on factors such as race, ability, gender, culture, and language. Implicit bias is not limited to early childhood practices and perceptions. It's actually a fact of life, and it spans a broad range of occupations. For example, I recently read an article about selecting musicians to play in an orchestra, and it was around 1970s that orchestras started to introduce blind auditions because they saw that fewer than 5% of women were represented in their orchestras. Blind auditions were responsible for a 30% increase in the likelihood that female musicians would be hired. So implicit bias, while it isn't intentional, it is a fact of life, and it is something that we have to acknowledge and deal with. It's also worth noting that our implicit biases often come out when we make quick decisions under stress, and when And in those circumstances, we often end up relying on unconscious stereotypes. Implicit biases become harmful when they affect decisions made about how children are treated at school, which in turn affects their chances at succeeding in school and in life. To demonstrate implicit bias in action, Dr. Walter Gilliam and his team from the Edward Ziegler Center in Child Development and Social Policy at Yale University conducted a study. They recruited participants at a nationwide conference for early childhood educators and asked them to watch several video clips of preschool children engaged in typical tabletop activities. The children were racially balanced: one white boy, one white girl, one black boy, and one black girl. Early childhood teachers were told the study was related to better understanding how teachers detect challenging behaviors in the classroom. They were told sometimes this involves seeing behavior before it becomes a problem, and they were asked to press the enter key on a computer keyboard every time they saw a behavior that they felt could become potentially challenging. They were told the video clips may or may not contain challenging behaviors and to press the keyboard as often as they needed. In addition to the keyboard entries, an eye-tracking device was used to log the time teachers spent watching the behavior of individual children. And by the way, with regard to the children used in this study, they were all child actors and no challenging behaviors were present. Dr. Gilliam and his team found teachers spent more time looking at boys than girls. In particular, teachers spent more time watching the black boy in the videos. When teachers were asked to identify which of the children required most of their attention, 42% indicated the black boy, 34% indicated the white boy, 13% indicated the white girl, and 10% indicated the black girl. And the race of the teacher did not impact the findings. Dr. Gilliam and his team found that teachers appeared to expect challenging behaviors more from black children and specifically black boys. White teachers seemed to hold black children to lower behavioral expectations, while black teachers held black children to very high standards. So implicit bias, it seems, is a factor that we need to consider when we think about children's behavior. The good news is that implicit biases are not permanent. By working to consciously and intentionally recognize and overcome our biases, we can stop them from having a negative effect on the way we interact with children and families. This will help all children succeed and help to reduce suspensions and expulsions, especially for boys, children of color, and children with disabilities. I had the privilege of attending a conference recently where Dr. Rosemary Allen, an expert on implicit bias in early childhood, talked about how to reduce the impact of unintentional biases. And if you haven't a chance, I would invite you to go look on YouTube and watch some of Dr. Allen's presentations, particularly her TED Talk. But some of the ways that Dr. Allen suggests to help address implicit bias include being mindful. Practicing mindfulness is helpful in promoting awareness and making implicit biases explicit. Mindfulness is paying attention on purpose. It requires noticing and acknowledging your behavior without judgment, even when it is uncomfortable. Dr. Allen also suggests that you notice and wonder. Notice your discomfort when engaging with others. After noticing, wonder why you are experiencing discomfort. It is also important to understand that implicit biases are most likely to influence decisions during times of stress and fear, especially when a quick decision is being made. During these times, stop and take deep breaths. By doing so, you will become more aware of your body and your responses to behaviors. Again, wonder why and ask yourself if the decision or response requires immediate attention. This will allow you time to be more thoughtful, thereby disrupting the impact of implicit bias on decision-making during times of high stress. Don't be colorblind. Asserting that skin color does not matter allows teachers to deny the existence of implicit bias. Racial blindness promotes the fallacy that teachers are beyond bias. ignores racial disparities, and places blame on the behaviors of children of color. It is important to talk about race and to normalize racial conversations, regardless of how difficult or challenging that might be at times. Be culturally responsive. Using culturally responsive practices are shown to close the discipline gap. Creating meaningful connections requires teachers to both deepen their knowledge about each child and critically examine their own biases and its influences on teaching. Be culturally humble. Culturally responsive practices are most effective when coupled with cultural humility. Cultural humility challenges teachers to humble themselves, have an open mind, and be willing to learn about the culture and lifestyles of children and families. This begins by acknowledging that you are not the expert on every child in your classroom. Children and families bring something to you that you can learn from. Developing relationships with the child's family creates linkages between school and home and establish awareness of the culture that students bring with them into the classroom. Viewing the child through this cultural context provides an understanding of the child and the factors that influence behaviors. Armed with this knowledge, you can develop teaching strategies that promote the child's culture, learning style, and racial identity in the classroom. So I expect most of you are familiar with the pyramid model, the evidence-based model that helps us promote young children's healthy social and emotional development. It has three broad tiers. Tier 1, which is represented in the bottom of the pyramid in blue. This is the universal level where we include practices such as creating a high-quality environment that is needed to ensure the promotion of social development of children. 80% of children benefit from this level of support. So 80% of children, when you give them a high-quality supportive environment where nurturing relationships with teachers and peers are encouraged, then children have better social skills and less behavior problems in classrooms. The second tier is in green, and this is prevention. The prevention level includes the provision of targeted supports such as social skills groups or activities explicitly planned to teach social skills to children who are at risk of challenging behavior. So again, this is the prevention area of the pyramid. 5 to 10% of children typically need to receive support at this level. It's not enough just to tell children to behave. It is important that children also receive some social skills training as part of the everyday typical early childhood curriculum. One of the strategies that we use here at the Mailman Segal Center is we use the Sanford Harmony Project, where we have children buddy up with peers and where they do activities with each other. And those peers are either selected at random by the teacher, or they're, you take turns to select a peer. And children learn to appreciate different perspectives from the children that they're partnered with. They learn to compromise, negotiate, and some children learn to be more assertive using these strategies. The third level of the tier of the pyramid model is intervention. And this is where the needs for individualized and intensive interventions are provided to children with persistent challenges. And approximately 1 to 5% of children may need support at this level. So if you look at a typical early childhood program, a child with who requires intensive intervention, that might be one child per 20 to 30 children. Again, if we look and take the pyramid model as our guide, we know that there are 10 steps for guiding behavior at tier 1. The first one is to arrange and modify the environment. A room arrangement is crucial to guiding children's behavior. Appropriate arrangements signal to children what they are expected to be responsible for in terms of their own behavior, and it is more pleasant to live and work in an attractive and aesthetically pleasing classroom or center. We all want a nice environment. Children should have them too. Number 2 is establish appropriate expectations. Setting limits is closely associated with establishing expectations and relates to defining unacceptable behavior. For example, Joey knocking over a block tower built by his friend and running in the classroom, this is generally considered unacceptable behavior. Setting clear expectations has 3 benefits. First, limits help you as a teacher clarify in your own mind what you believe is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And this will be based, obviously, on your knowledge of child development. Second, clear limits help prevent inconsistency and help children act with confidence because they know which behaviors are acceptable. And we all recognize that if you're going to guide children's behavior, it is important to be very consistent in your approach. And to be consistent, you need to know what is acceptable versus what is unacceptable behavior. And third, limits provide children with security. Children want and need limits. Number 3 is model appropriate behavior. Modeling occurs when you practice the behavior you expect of the children. For example, model and demonstrate social and group living behaviors using simple courtesies such as please, thank you, and you're welcome. You also, as the teacher, should model and practice cooperation, sharing, and respect for others. And number 4 is guide the whole child. Just as we differentiate instruction for each child, we also want to differentiate guidance for each child. This means that a one-size-fits-all approach to guidance really does not work. Assess each child's behavioral strengths and weaknesses and select appropriate guidance for each child. And number 5 is know and use developmentally appropriate practice. Knowing child development is the cornerstone of developmentally appropriate practice. You cannot guide the whole child if you do not know and understand where children are developmentally. Children cannot behave well when you expect too much or too little of them based on their development. If a child is not being stretched and they're bored, they're going to misbehave. If you make activities too complex for children, they are going to get frustrated and again act out. And we also know that if you expect children to wait their turn for long periods of time, you're more likely to have to see behavioral challenges emerge in those situations. A key for guiding children's behavior is to really know what each child is like. This is the real meaning of developmentally appropriate practice. You will want to study children's development and observe children's behavior to learn what is appropriate for all children and individual children based on their temperament, their gender, their socioeconomic backgrounds, and their culture. And very quickly, step 6 is meeting children's needs. Part of knowing children is knowing their needs, and we look for theories such as Maslow's hierarchy of needs or Erikson's stages of psychosocial development to understand what to expect of children. And can we really expect a child to sit quietly and pay attention if they're hungry? Can we expect appropriate social interactions from a child if she has never learned to trust? So again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Erikson's stages of psychosocial development would be appropriate in terms of knowing children's needs. Number 7 is help children build new behaviors. When guiding children, it is important for you to realize that it is not enough to model behaviors or to state expectations. You must be prepared to help children build new behaviors or replace inappropriate behaviors that are getting in the way of their learning. But it is important to approach this through the lens of relationships. And again, number 8, empower children to reiterate guiding behavior is not about compliance and control. And it is not a matter of getting children to please adults with remarks such as, show me how perfect you can be, or don't embarrass me in front of others, or I want to see nice groups, or I'm waiting for you to be quiet. Instead, it is important to instill in children a sense of independence and responsibility for their own behavior. For example, you might say, Taylor, you worked a long time cutting out the flower you drew. You kept working on it until you were finished. Would you like some tape to hang it up? Use praise and encouragement. When you've done a good job, you want to be told you've done a good job. Children are the same way. Children want to receive feedback in the form of praise and encouragement, and they want to feel good about their accomplishments just like we do. So use praise and encouragement. Number 10, develop partnerships with parents, families, and others. Involving parents and families is a wonderful way to gain valuable insights about children's behavior. You and parents must be partners and work cooperatively in guiding children's behaviors. After all, the parent is the expert in their child. On occasion, you may need to reach out for additional support. When you have a positive relationship with parents, guiding them to other resources will be less of a struggle because you have formed that positive relationship. So, what can we offer for children at the top of the pyramid, the 1 to 5% of children who need intensive intervention? We know they exist. We know they're in many of our early childhood programs in our community, and we know they need help. At the Mailman Segal Center for Human Development, we have what we call our Preschool Plus program. The Preschool Plus program provides multi-tiered support to improve social, emotional, and academic outcomes for young children with conduct and behavior disorders. Individualized goals are implemented in a classroom setting so children to teach behavioral expectations, model and reinforce positive behavior, and provide the social and emotional self-management skills needed to build and sustain healthy relationships in school and at home. The Preschool Plus program that we offer at the Mailman Segal Center is based on the summer treatment program at Florida International University. It is an intensive full-day program, and by full day we mean 8:30 to 3 o'clock. We don't have children stay for what we often term as aftercare because we want them to have a successful day at our program. And we find that 8:30 to 3:30 is that sweet spot for ensuring success. The program is also designed to bridge the gap between the early childhood and elementary school setting to promote school readiness in children with significant externalizing behavior problems such as aggression, defiance, inattention, hyperactivity, or impulsivity. To qualify for the Preschool Plus program, children can have an IEP for behavior. They can have a diagnosis of attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, or they could have a diagnosis of oppositional defiance. They may have been expelled or were in danger of being expelled from preschool. As part of the onboarding process and the selection criteria for the Preschool Plus program, we conduct telephone screenings and face-to-face interviews with parents. During the telephone screening process, parents are asked questions from 3 subscales of the Behavior Assessment System for Children, the 3rd edition, the BASC-3. The assessment tool provides scores on positive adaptive behaviors and negative clinical dimensions, and scores can range from clinically significant, at risk, or to average. Children must score at least at the subclinical level to qualify for the Preschool Plus program. We know that we say subclinical because we know that sometimes when we ask these questions of parents, they will often err on the side of optimism in terms of their child's behavior. So even if children score subclinically, they may still be a suitable candidate for the program. As part of the intake process, parents are also invited to a face-to-face interview, and their children's cognitive skills are assessed. We find that children must have an IQ level of at least 75 to understand some of the strategies that are used in the program. And the program is quite intense, so we want to make sure that children will benefit both academically, socially, and emotionally from the program. So I want to be clear about what we mean by challenging behavior, because often there is no clearly defined global term or definition for what we mean by challenging behavior. And at the Preschool Plus, we consider it as any abnormal behavior, pattern of behavior, which is above the expected norm for age and level of development, that can be described as a challenging behavior. It has been defined as culturally abnormal behaviors of such intensity, frequency, or duration that the physical safety of the person or others is likely to be placed in serious jeopardy, or behavior which is likely to seriously limit or deny access to and use of ordinary community facilities. So we're not talking about children here who just won't listen occasionally or who will answer back occasionally. These are children whose ability to be successful in school is seriously jeopardized. And in a sense, their safety and the safety of their peers can also be compromised. Challenging behavior can include self-injury, physical or verbal aggression, non-compliance, or serious disruption to the environment to the degree that it interferes with the learning or experiences of other children. These behaviors can impede learning, restrict access to normal activities and social opportunities, and require a considerable amount of manpower and financial resources to manage effectively. So yes, teachers want to do best by every single child in their classroom, but if you have a teacher with 18 children and you have a child who has severe or significant behavioral challenges, that can be quite an obstacle for a teacher to overcome. So, we want the Preschool Plus program is an intensive program that really is designed to support children with significant challenges that interfere with their ability to be successful, their peers' ability to be successful, and indeed the teacher's ability to be successful as well. The components of the Preschool Plus program include a child-centered intervention focused on developing children's behavioral, social, emotional, self-regulation, developmental, and academic preparedness for school. We want children to be successful at school, and we know from research studies that most kindergarten teachers today are more concerned that children have the ability to regulate their behavior, to attend, to listen, to get along with their peers, than they are with children's ability to identify letters of the alphabet. Those skills can be taught, but if those foundational social and emotional skills are not there, then children's learning can be seriously derailed. We also include a parent-centered intervention focused on promoting positive parenting using techniques from the group-based parent-child interaction therapy, or PCIT program. In the Preschool Plus program, between 8 and 10 children are assigned to a classroom staffed by a teacher, a behavior specialist, and 2 or more paraprofessional developmental aides. This typically results in a ratio of at least 2 to 5 in terms of staff to student ratios. So yes, this program is not inexpensive to run, but to be successful, we recognize that good ratios are essential. All staff complete a 10-day training prior to program delivery and are supervised by licensed professional staff, need to know what they are doing, why they are doing it, and how to provide intervention in an appropriate manner. So throughout a typical day in the Preschool Plus, children participate in activities that promote their behavioral and social emotional skills, their academic skills. We have physical activities that are designed to support children's peer building and positive relationships with others in their group. And we also, one of our goals is to promote a positive attitude towards learning and towards school. As we know, children with behavioral challenges often face hurdles, not just with regulating their own behavior, but by being labeled as the bad child in the classroom. And it's often very challenging for children to escape those labels once they're attached to them. And in a sense, the label can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So building a positive attitude towards learning and school is an important part of the Preschool Plus program. We use a behavior modification program across activities that combines both a point and response cost system where children earn points for positive behaviors and lose points for negative behaviors. Praise and classroom rules and consistent routines are incorporated across activities to promote positive behaviors. And we want to see a praise ratio of around 3 to 1. So we want children to be told that to be given positive praise at a ratio of 3 times to any times that we're addressing those negative behaviors. So teachers really need to see and identify when children are behaving well and to reinforce that by praise. We also, have the classroom rules and consistent routines because we also know that that is an important part of a safe, secure, and healthy environment for children. There are 3 categories of behavior that are regarded as serious violations, and there are 3 because we want to make sure that we're really only focusing on those serious violations and transgressions. These are aggression, and that is intentional aggression, intentional destruction of property, and repeated non-compliance. These can result in timeout from positive reinforcement. You're using procedures from the PCIT program. Children exchange points earned for daily and weekly classroom rewards and privileges. For example, there might be a treasure box at the end of the week, or there might be a fun Friday, and so children save up their rewards and the points that they've earned and are able to exchange them for either a treasure box or participation in a fun Friday event. At the end of each day, parents are also provided verbal and written feedback about children's behavior and academic progress via a daily report card. And, parents are instructed on how to reinforce children's behavior at school by rewarding them at home for any positive gains they've made as identified in their daily report card. We also do academics for around 50% of the day, probably more than a typical preschool. But the reason for this is twofold. One, children need many opportunities to test their compliance. So when they're asked to complete an activity, the expectation is that they complete an activity. And 2, children often need to make up for the academic time that they may have lost due to their behavior. And we know that sometimes children misbehave to escape the activities that are non-preferred, and academic activities are often non-preferred activities. So it is important that children are provided opportunities to make up for the lost time of it that they've spent escaping activities, and that they learn those important academic skills. We also, for 2 hours every week that the program is in session, parents attend a parent training program. Attendance is mandatory. Parents must commit to the training, or their child will not be accepted to the program. That's how much we value and recognize the importance of parent participation in the program. This is not a program where parents just leave their child in a school and expect the staff in that program to repair or fix their child's behavior. This is not a quick fix. It is not something that can be done alone. Parents are an essential part of ensuring the success of navigating those behavioral challenges. Training at the Mailman Segal Center, we provide training between 3:30 and 5:30 one time per week. And we do provide childcare for children. So this is quite a commitment for parents, but again, it is an essential and mandatory or required component of the program. The parent behavior management content is based on the parent-child interaction therapy, or PCIT approach. And the first number of classes focus on the importance of establishing warm relationships between parents and children. For parents, having a child with behavioral challenges can create an enormous amount of stress. They All parents want the best for their children, and when children's behavior is impacting their success in school, when they're labeled as the bad kid, when no one wants to attend their birthday parties, or they're not invited to birthday parties, that can actually be very traumatic for parents, and it does create stress because parents recognize the importance of preparing their children for the more academic orientation of elementary school. So during the first classes, parents learn and apply skills proven to help children feel calm, to help them feel secure in their relationship with their parents, and to help children feel good about themselves. And the second half of the sessions help parents manage the most challenging of their child's behaviors while remaining confident, calm, and consistent in their approach to discipline. Parents learn proven strategies to help children accept limits, comply with directions, respect rules, and demonstrate appropriate behaviors in public. Parents are also supervised as they implement the strategies with their children during training sessions. So children are sometimes invited into the training sessions, and parents have an opportunity to try out some of the strategies directly with their children. And it is amazing to see how comfortable and how quickly a parent's confidence grows as they learn that they can actually do this, that they can be successful, that their children will listen if they follow the strategies as outlined in the parent-child interaction therapy program. So the most important thing is, well, does this program result in changes in children's behavior? Well, we're in the process of analyzing the results of our 8-week intensive Preschool Plus summer program. But parents have anecdotally shared that they've noticed significant improvements in their child's behavior, and that the changes were evident at around the 3 or 4 week mark of the program. We also plan to follow this group of children by visiting them in their new settings and providing help or support to their new children, or to their new teachers, I should say. Four of the children who participated in the Preschool Plus summer program have now entered kindergarten, and the rest are entering pre-K. So this program is for children ages 3 to 5. However, since we modeled the Preschool Plus summer program on the summer treatment program at FIU, results from their studies, which include an open trial and 2 small randomized trials, indicate that the summer treatment program at FIU yielded significant improvements in children's school readiness outcomes, including their academic skills. It improved their behavioral functioning at home and at school, their social, emotional, and self-regulation skills, and their overall readiness for kindergarten, with maintenance of gains 6 months post-intervention. So it is an intensive program, and it does focus very much on ensuring children's compliance with the expectations of this program, and it does focus on ensuring that children do not violate the 3 broad rules of no intentional aggression, no intentional destruction of property, and the expectation is that they do not repeatedly engage in non-compliance. So with those 3 broad expectations, there also are individual goals for children, and those are tailored very much to the individual child. So we're still looking at what the outcomes in terms of some of the data that we've collected. But again, the summer treatment program at FIU has shown that children who participate in an intensive program can demonstrate significant gains, and that those gains are still evident 6 months post participation in the program. We at the Mailman Segal Centres, we are currently accepting applicants for the fall semester of the Preschool Plus program. This program will begin on Monday, September 30th, and if you know of anyone who you feel would benefit from the program, please feel free to share this information with them. Again, we have a process for selecting candidates. We want to make sure that any children who are selected for the program are screened and that they do meet the criteria for inclusion. So if you know of any children or families that you feel would benefit, please feel free to provide the information that we supplied. And so that's basically the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, or you can ask them now, or you can send me an email. My contact information is provided. And thank you for participating.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. We don't have any questions that are coming through right this second, but maybe one question that I can propose is, what is the one main takeaway from today's webinar for a school that's struggling, a preschool that's struggling with a child displaying challenging behaviors? What would you recommend?
Well, the first thing I would recommend is to look into the role of implicit bias. It has been an eye-opener for me, and it is certainly something that is important for all early childhood professionals to consider, whether or not implicit bias is playing a role in this definition or categorizing children as having challenging behaviors. It's hard to kind of say what is the main takeaway, but implicit bias is one of them. The second of all is, do be aware of the pyramid model and the fact that 80% of children, but the vast majority of children benefit from classroom environments that nurture positive relationships. It is critical that teachers and other professionals get to know children and families at the individual level, and not to just say this child is a problem because they have the behavior, but instead look at yourself and say, how am I viewing? What lens? What have I done to try to ensure that this child is being provided with an environment that will support their success? Yes, there will inevitably be children, and we looked at the data that shows between 1 and 5% of children may need some intensive intervention. But again, that is 1 to 5% of children. Again, that is a very small number, and sometimes, we end up imagining that is a larger percentage, really because we haven't done the work that we need to do to ensuring that we have provided an appropriate environment for children's success.
Well, thank you so much, Lorraine. I know that if anybody else has any questions, I don't see anyone that's written to us, but feel free to reach out to Dr. Brevny. Again, her phone number is listed on this webinar, as well as her email, and she will be happy to help answer any questions you may have with regards to the subject. So thank you so much for participating today, and we hope you have a great day. Thank you.